This video is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. The information provided does not constitute legal, financial, or professional travel advice. Travel regulations, visa requirements, specifically regarding the Schengen area and the ESHA system, and local laws are subject to frequent change. Viewers are advised to conduct their own due diligence, consult official government resources such as the U.S. Department of State and relevant European consulates, and verify all information before making travel arrangements or financial commitments. The creators are not responsible for any losses, legal complications, or travel disruptions resulting from the use of this information. The American dream of quitting your job, throwing a change of clothes into a rucksack, and drifting through the streets of Europe is officially a logistical minefield. If you are planning to step onto a plane with nothing but a blue passport and a sense of adventure, you are statistically likely to face one of three potential outcomes. You will be fined thousands of dollars in hidden fees, you will be denied entry at a border crossing you didn't know existed, or you will be banned from the European continent for half a decade. Most U.S. travelers view Europe as a monolithic playground, a single country where your passport is a golden ticket. This is the most dangerous misconception you can carry across the Atlantic. Right now, there is a silent shift happening in European border control that is catching thousands of Americans off guard. We are talking about the transition from the traditional stamp-in, stamp-out system to a high-tech, data-driven surveillance network that knows exactly how many minutes you have spent on European soil. In this first part of our deep dive masterclass, we are going to dismantle the myths of the carefree backpacker and replace them with a cold, hard strategy for navigating the most complex travel landscape in the world. The first thing every U.S. traveler needs to understand is the 90/180-day rule. And no, it is not as simple as counting 3 months. Case studies of travelers who have been detained at the airport in Frankfurt or Amsterdam often reveal the same mistake. They calculated their stay based on calendar months rather than individual days. In the Schengen area, which comprises most of Western and Central Europe, you are permitted to stay for 90 days within any 180-day period. This is a rolling window. If you enter on June 1st and stay until August 29th, you have used your 90 days. If you try to re-enter in October, thinking you have a fresh start for the new season, you will be flagged by the entry/exit system. The math is brutal. Every day you spend in a Schengen country is counted retrospectively. If, at any point, the number of days you have spent in the zone over the last 180 days exceeds 90, you are an illegal overstayer. The historical trends show that European border agents have moved from a lax warning policy to a strict enforcement policy. An overstay of even 24 hours can result in a fine of several hundred euros, and a stamp in your passport that alerts every other border agent in the world that you are a risk. But the complexity does not stop at the calendar. We are currently witnessing the rollout of ETIAS, the European Travel Information and Authorization System. For decades, U.S. citizens enjoyed visa-free travel to Europe. That era is ending. While ETIAS is not a visa in the traditional sense, it is a mandatory pre-travel authorization. If you show up at JFK or LAX without your ESHA's approval linked to your passport, you will not be allowed to board your flight. This is a digital screening process designed to cross-reference your data with Interpol and Europol databases. You must apply at least 96 hours before your flight, though historical trends in similar systems, like the US ESTA, suggest that any red flags in your background could lead to a manual review process taking weeks. Do not assume your approval is a formality. If you have a minor legal infraction from 10 years ago, or if your passport expires in less than 6 months, you are looking at a potential denial. Once you actually land, the next hurdle is the financial architecture of the continent, which is designed to siphon money away from unsuspecting Americans. One of the most common pitfalls is the dynamic currency conversion scam found at almost every European ATM. When you insert your US debit card, the machine will recognize it and ask if you want to be charged in US dollars or the local currency, such as euros, francs, or koruna. The screen will look helpful, offering you a guaranteed exchange rate. This is a trap. If you choose US dollars, the ATM provider applies their own arbitrary, inflated exchange rate, which is often 5% to 10% worse than the mid-market rate. Always, without exception, choose the local currency. Let your home bank do the conversion. Furthermore, the era of the all-cash Europe is fading, but the card-only Europe is not yet universal. In Germany and parts of Central Europe, cash is still king for small purchases, while in the UK and Scandinavia, a physical coin is almost a relic of the past. If you carry only a credit card, you will find yourself unable to pay for a €2 water in Munich. If you carry only cash, you will find yourself unable to use a public restroom in Stockholm. The logistical nightmare deepens when you consider how you will actually move between cities. The American instinct is to buy a Eurail pass, believing it is the cheapest and most flexible way to see the continent. However, data-driven comparisons show that for many travelers, the Eurail pass is a massive over-expenditure. In countries like France, Spain, and Italy, having a rail pass does not mean you can just hop on a train. You are often required to purchase a seat reservation for high-speed lines, which can cost an additional 10 to 30 euros per leg. If you are traveling during peak season, these reservations sell out weeks in advance. The alternative is the budget airline circuit, Ryanair, EasyJet, and Wizz Air. These carriers offer flights for as low as 15 euros, which sounds like a dream for a backpacker. But this is where the hidden costs of European travel become truly predatory. These airlines utilize secondary airports that are often 60 to 90 minutes away from the actual city. For example, a flight to Paris might land you in Beauvais, which requires a 17 euro bus ride and 2 hours of your life just to reach the city center. When you factor in the luggage fees, where a single backpack exceeding strict dimensions can cost 50 euros at the gate, the 15 euro flight suddenly becomes more expensive than a premium train ticket. This masterclass is designed to solve these problems by giving you a granular, day-by-day framework for your journey. We are going to move past the surface-level advice found in glossy brochures. Today, we have established the legal and financial boundaries of your trip. We have exposed the 90-day trap, the ISHA's requirement, and the ATM conversion scams that target U.S. travelers specifically. But this is only the foundation. In the following sections, we will dive into the quiet culture of Europe and why the loud American stereotype is actually a safety risk that makes you a prime target for pickpockets and scammers. We will break down the specific gear that separates the professional traveler from the amateur, and why your 60-liter hiking pack is actually your greatest liability. By the end of this guide, you will not just be traveling through Europe, you will be navigating it with the precision of a local, avoiding the tourist tax that most Americans pay without even realizing it. To understand the physical reality of a 2026 European expedition, let us look at the case study of Alex, a traveler from Austin, Texas, who landed at Rome Fiumicino in June 2026. Alex followed the traditional American mindset of being prepared for every possible scenario. He arrived with a 75-liter technical hiking backpack, weighing approximately 45 pounds, strapped to his back, and a smaller daypack clipped to his chest. On paper, Alex was ready for anything. In reality, he was a walking billboard for professional thieves and a victim of his own logistics within 60 minutes of clearing customs. The first obstacle Alex faced was the physical geography of Europe. Most U.S. travelers are accustomed to paved parking lots, elevators, and smooth transit hubs. Europe is a landscape of ancient cobblestones, narrow spiral staircases and 5-story walk-ups, and crowded metro platforms with broken escalators. Imagine if you are standing at the base of the Spanish Steps or navigating the hills of Lisbon with 45 pounds of dead weight, pulling at your center of gravity. Within 3 days, Alex developed grade 1 ankle strain and lower back spasms. Historical trends in traveler health reports suggest that overpacking is the leading cause of early trip fatigue and medical expenses among Americans. The solution is the 40-liter rule. In 2026, the gold standard for the savvy backpacker is a single carry-on sized bag, specifically designed for overhead bins. This is not just about convenience, it is a financial strategy. Budget carriers like Ryanair and EasyJet have transitioned to even stricter baggage enforcement. If your bag exceeds the 55 by 40 by 20 centimeter limit by even a fraction, you face a potential outcome of paying 70 euros at the gate. By sticking to a 40-liter limit, you bypass these predatory fees and maintain the mobility required to sprint for a connecting train in Munich. Let us dive deeper into the contents of that bag, because what you pack determines your social standing and safety in European cities. There is a specific psychological phenomenon where American travelers tend to dress for a mountain hike while visiting a cosmopolitan capital like Madrid or Vienna. If you are wearing zip-off cargo pants, a neon moisture-wicking shirt, and massive trail running shoes, you have effectively opted out of the local culture before you even speak. In 2026, European cities have seen a significant push towards sustainable, high-quality minimalism. To blend in and reduce your risk of being targeted by the sophisticated pickpocketing syndicates in Barcelona, you must adopt the 5-4-3-2-1 packing system. This consists of 5 sets of socks and underwear, for tops 3 bottoms, 2 pairs of shoes, and 1 accessory like a hat or jacket. The fabric choice is the critical variable here. Cotton is your enemy in the backpacking world. It absorbs sweat, takes 24 hours to air dry in a humid hostel, and begins to smell after 4 hours of walking. Case studies of successful multi-month travelers consistently point toward merino wool and high-grade synthetics. Merino wool is a miracle fiber for the 2026 traveler. Its natural antimicrobial properties mean you can wear a single shirt for 3 or 4 days without it developing an odor, which is essential when you only have 4 tops. Step by step, your wardrobe should be built around a neutral color palette: black, navy, or charcoal. This allows every item to be interchangeable, creating dozens of outfit combinations from a handful of pieces. One pair of shoes should be a high-quality, broken-in walking sneaker that looks like a dress shoe, while the second should be a lightweight sandal or flip-flop for hostel showers and beach days. The technological landscape of 2026 also requires a total rethink of your digital kit. Gone are the days of hunting for a local SIM card shop in a train station. For a U.S. traveler, the most efficient potential outcome is the utilization of a global eSIM. Before you leave the United States, your phone should be unlocked, and you should have an eSIM profile downloaded that covers the entire European Union plus the United Kingdom and Switzerland. This allows for seamless border crossings where your data remains active as you move from the French Alps into the Italian Dolomites. However, the hardware remains a point of failure for many. U.S. electricity operates at 120 volts, while Europe operates at 230 volts. Furthermore, the frequency in the US is 60 Hz compared to Europe's 50 Hz. Imagine if Alex from Texas plugged his high-end US hairdryer or electric shaver directly into a wall outlet in London using a simple plastic plug adapter. The device would likely smell of burning electronics within seconds and could potentially trigger a small electrical fire. You must distinguish between an adapter, which simply changes the shape of the prongs, and a converter, which changes the voltage. In 2026, most modern electronics like iPhones, MacBooks, and Kindle devices are dual voltage, meaning they can handle both 120 and 230 volts. You only need a small modular international adapter. But for high wattage items, the safest strategy is to leave them at home and buy a cheap local version once you land. We must also discuss the security of your gear, which has evolved into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. In 2026, pickpockets in major hubs like Rome, Paris, and Prague no longer rely on simple hand-in-pocket maneuvers. They use distraction techniques involving groups of people or digital skimmers that can read the RFID chips in your credit cards from several inches away. You need a 2-tier security system. Tier 1 is your immediate access. A small crossbody bag worn on your front, never on your back. This bag should have locking zippers and an internal RFID blocking pocket for your primary passport and daily use credit card. Tier 2 is your deep storage. A money belt worn under your clothes or a hidden pocket sewn into your waistband. This is where you keep your emergency backup card and the bulk of your cash. A critical step in your preparation is the creation of a digital shadow. Before you depart, scan every important document: passport, ISHA's approval, medical insurance, and emergency contact list. Upload these to a secure, encrypted cloud drive and also keep an offline copy on your phone. If your physical bag is stolen in a Paris cafe, having these documents accessible in 30 seconds at a local police station or U.S. embassy is the difference between a minor inconvenience and a trip-ending catastrophe. As you prepare to step out of your home in the United States and into the terminal, you have to realize that your mindset is your most important piece of gear. The American traveler often brings a sense of urgency and a desire for immediate service that does not translate well to the European pace of life. In our next section, we are going to look at the social engineering required to thrive in Europe. We will break down why your behavior at a restaurant can either get you the best seat in the house or an intentionally slow service and a cold shoulder. We will also explore the hidden world of European accommodations, comparing the 2026 hostel culture against the rising trend of monastic stays and high-tech capsule hotels. You have the gear and the legal paperwork, but do you know how to talk your way into a sold-out train or how to find the secret menu in a Venetian Baccaro? The real journey is about to begin. To navigate the social landscape of Europe in 2026, you must first unlearn the American customer service model. Consider the case study of Sarah, a marketing executive from Chicago, who walked into a traditional bistro in the 6th arrondissement of Paris. Sarah acted exactly as she would at a high-end restaurant in the United States. She walked past the host's stand to find a better table, spoke at a volume that could be heard 3 tables away, and attempted to flag down her waiter every 5 minutes to ask for more water. The potential outcome of this behavior was predictable. Sarah received the slowest service of her life, her food arrived lukewarm, and the staff treated her with a cold, professional distance. Sarah left convinced that Parisians are rude, but the reality is that she had inadvertently committed several social transgressions. In Europe, the restaurant is not a place of rapid turnover. It is a sacred space for the guest. When you enter a European establishment, you are a guest in their house, not a king on a throne. Step 1 is the mandatory greeting. In 2026, even in highly touristy areas, failing to say bonjour, giorno, or hola upon entry is seen as an aggressive act of dehumanization. You must wait to be seated in almost every country except for very casual pubs in the UK or beer gardens in Germany. Once seated, you are the owner of that table for as long as you wish. Historical trends show that US travelers often feel ignored because a waiter does not check on them every 10 minutes. In Europe, a waiter checking on you constantly is considered rude and intrusive. They are giving you space to get the bill, which is never brought automatically because that would be seen as rushing you out. You must catch the waiter's eye and mimic the motion of writing on your palm. Imagine if you are in an Italian trattoria and you see a €3 charge per person labeled as coperto. Many US travelers view this as a scam or a hidden fee. In reality, this is a standard cover charge that pays for the bread, the tablecloth, and the service. Because of this, tipping culture in 2026 remains vastly different from the US. While the influence of American tourism has introduced more tip prompts on digital payment screens, the local standard is still the roundup. If your bill is €47, leaving 50 is seen as generous. Leaving a 20% tip is not only unnecessary, but can actually contribute to local inflation, making these venues unaffordable for the residents. This brings us to the quiet culture. If you can hear an American in a public space, they are speaking too loudly. In 2026, European cities have become increasingly sensitive to overtourism and noise pollution. In cities like Amsterdam and Florence, there are now local ordinances regarding noise in residential areas. If you are walking through a narrow street in the Trastevere district of Rome at 11 p.m., speak in a whisper. The case study of a group of U.S. students who were fined in Venice for loud behavior near a residential bridge serves as a warning. Your goal is to be invisible until you choose to interact. This invisibility is your greatest security feature. A loud traveler is a distracted traveler, and a distracted traveler is the primary target for a 2026 street scammer. Communication in 2026 has been revolutionized by real-time AI translation, yet the social capital of a few local words has never been higher. Do not rely entirely on your device. Follow the 5-word rule for every country you visit. Hello, please, thank you, sorry, and the bill. Using these 5 words in the local tongue before switching to English opens doors that remain closed to the average tourist. It signals that you are an explorer, not just a consumer. When you do use translation apps, use them discreetly. Holding a phone in someone's face is a breach of etiquette that often results in a refusal to help. The choice of where you sleep in 2026 is no longer just a choice between a hotel and a hostel. It is a choice of cultural immersion. Let us look at the evolution of the European hostel. Modern hubs like those in Berlin or Lisbon have shifted toward the boutique hostel model. These are high-tech, digital nomad-friendly environments featuring soundproof pods, biometric lockers, and ultra-fast mesh Wi-Fi. However, if you are looking for a deep-dive experience, consider the monastic stay. Throughout Italy, Spain, and Austria, monasteries and convents have opened their doors to travelers. For roughly €40 to €60 a night, you can stay in a 14th-century cell that has been modernized with basic amenities. These stays offer a level of silence and historical weight that no hotel can replicate. The trade-off is often a curfew, usually 10 o'clock or 11 p.m., but for the serious backpacker, the potential outcome is a profound connection to the history of the region. Then there is the Venice problem. If you are staying in Venice in 2026, you are likely paying a daily entry fee to the city, part of the new sustainability tax. To escape the tourist traps of the Rialto, you must master the Baccaro. A Baccaro is a small local wine bar where Venetians gather for sacchetti, small plates of food. Step by step, the process works like this. You enter, you do not ask for a menu, you look at the glass display case, point to 3 or 4 items, and ask for an ombra, which is a small glass of local wine. This will cost you a fraction of a sit-down meal and provides a genuine social experience. If you try to find a secret menu or a local discount by asking in English at a restaurant with pictures of pasta on the windows, you will fail. The secret menu is not a physical piece of paper. It is the act of ordering like a local. Navigating the transit between these social hubs requires a masterclass in the 2026 rail system. While the Eurail Pass is a common choice, the rise of private high-speed competitors like Italo in Italy or Ouigo in France has created a fragmented market. To find the best potential outcomes for your budget, you must use aggregator apps that include these low-cost private lines, which Eurail often excludes. Furthermore, in 2026, the night train has made a massive comeback. Lines connecting Vienna to Paris or Brussels to Prague allow you to save the cost of a night's accommodation while moving across the continent. But be warned, these sell out months in advance. Imagine if you show up at the station in Vienna expecting to buy a sleeperette for that night. You will find yourself sitting upright in a crowded second-class carriage for 12 hours, arriving in Paris exhausted and unable to check into your hostel until 3 p.m. We have mastered the gear, the legalities, and the social engineering of the continent. But there is a darker side to the European dream that most guides refuse to mention. As we move into the next part of this masterclass, we are going to expose the sophisticated crime networks that operate in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower and the Colosseum. We will break down the 2026 friendship bracelet scam, the fake police gambit, and the high-tech digital skimming techniques that can drain your US bank account before you even realize your wallet is missing. You have the social skills to blend in, but do you have the tactical awareness to stay safe in the most crowded tourist zones on Earth? The next chapter is about survival in the urban jungle. The transition from a high-trust society to the opportunistic environment of a major European transit hub is where most US travelers experience their first failure. Consider the experience of Michael, a graphic designer from Seattle visiting Paris in April 2026. Michael is well-traveled within North America and considers himself street smart. As he exited the Gare du Nord station, he was approached by a polite young woman holding a clipboard. She asked if he spoke English and if he would sign a petition for a local charity supporting disabled children. This is the entry point for the petition scam, a tactic that has seen a resurgence in 2026 due to its psychological effectiveness. While Michael was focused on the clipboard, reading the names of other tourists who had supposedly donated, an accomplice was positioned behind him. Using the clipboard as a visual shield to block the view of bystanders, the accomplice utilized a small high-tensile pair of snips to cut the strap of Michael's expensive camera back. By the time Michael finished signing, the woman thanked him and walked away, and his bag was gone. Historical trends show that these distraction techniques are not random. They are highly choreographed. In 2026, the most prevalent physical scam targeting Americans is the friendship bracelet gambit, commonly found at the base of the Sacré-Cœur in Paris or near the Duomo in Milan. A man will approach you with a handful of colorful threads, appearing friendly and saying he wants to give you a gift. Before you can react, he has tied a knot around your wrist that is impossible to undo without scissors. He then demands a donation, often 20 or 50 euros. If you refuse, a group of his associates will surround you, creating a scene of high-stakes social pressure that most US travelers, who are conditioned to avoid public confrontation, will pay to end. To survive these encounters, you must implement the zero engagement policy. In the United States, it is considered polite to acknowledge someone when they speak to you. In a high-risk European tourist zone, an acknowledgement is a vulnerability. If someone approaches you with a clipboard, a bracelet, a gold ring they found on the ground, or a sudden spill on your jacket, you must not say no thank you or stop to explain. You simply keep walking at your original pace. Any verbal response, even a polite refusal, signals to the scammer that you are a soft target who can be engaged in a dialogue. Case studies of professional pickpockets reveal that they look for the eye contact of a tourist. If you maintain a 1,000-yard stare and move with purpose, you are statistically less likely to be bothered. As we move deeper into 2026, the threats have shifted from purely physical to sophisticated digital maneuvers. Imagine if Michael from Seattle sits down at a trendy cafe in Berlin. He sees a QR code on the table with a sign that says "Scan for menu and payment." This is a common feature of the post-2024 European dining landscape. However, a malicious actor has placed a transparent sticker over the legitimate QR code. When Michael scans it, he is directed to a spoofed website that looks identical to the cafe's digital menu. When he enters his credit card details to prepay for his meal, he is actually handing his data directly to a skimming operation. This is known as caching or QR phishing, and it is a leading cause of digital theft for US travelers in 2026. To mitigate this, always verify that the QR code is printed directly on the table or menu card and is not a sticker. Better yet, use a mobile wallet like Apple Pay or Google Pay, which utilizes tokenization, ensuring that your actual card number is never transmitted to the vendor. The infrastructure of European transit also presents a unique set of tactical challenges. The metro systems in Barcelona and Rome are notorious for the door pinch. Groups of thieves will hang around the train doors. Just as the chime sounds and the doors begin to close, they will snatch a phone out of a traveler's hand or pull a bag off a shoulder and jump onto the platform. The victim is then trapped on the departing train, unable to pursue the thief. In 2026, you should never stand near the doors with your phone out. If you must use your device for navigation, stand in the center of the carriage and maintain a firm, two-handed grip on the device. Furthermore, we are seeing the rise of the fake police scam in Central and Eastern Europe. In this scenario, two men in convincing uniforms or carrying official-looking badges will approach you, claiming they are looking for counterfeit currency or drugs. They will ask to see your wallet for a routine check. While they appear to be flipping through your bills, they are actually using sleight of hand to remove high-denomination notes. Real European police will almost never ask to see your cash in the street. If they need to verify your identity, they will ask for your passport and will likely escort you to a well-lit public area or a police station. If someone asks for your wallet, your response should be a firm request to walk to the nearest police station to conduct the search. In 2026, a legitimate officer will comply. A scammer will vanish. Hostel safety is another area where U.S. travelers often let their guard down. Even in a high-end boutique hostel, your primary risk is not the locals, but other travelers. A common case study involves the nightstand error. A traveler goes to sleep in a dorm room and leaves their phone charging on the small shelf next to their bed. While they are in a deep sleep, a fellow guest, who may be checking out early at 4 a.m., simply swaps their old, broken phone for the traveler's new iPhone 17 and disappears before the sun comes up. In 2026, your electronics should never be visible while you sleep. Use a portable power bank inside your locked locker to charge your devices overnight, or sleep with your phone inside your pillowcase. Step by step, your security routine should be as follows. Before leaving your accommodation, check your physical security: crossbody bag locked, RFID sleeves active, and backup cache hidden. Upon entering a high-traffic area, transition to high alert mode, avoiding phone use and maintaining a brisk pace. If approached by any unsolicited individual, utilize the zero engagement policy. If you find yourself in a situation where a theft has occurred, your first move is not to chase the thief, which can lead to physical harm, but to use your secondary device to instantly lock your primary phone and wipe your sensitive data. We have now covered the legal, physical, and tactical requirements of your European journey. You know how to pack, how to act, and how to stay safe in the face of 2026's most common threats. But all of this preparation is useless if you don't know how to fuel yourself properly. Many Americans spend twice as much as they need to on food because they don't understand the hidden language of the European menu. In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to dive into the gastronomic survival guide. We will explore why you should never eat at a place with a person standing outside holding a menu, the secret of the midday menu del dia that can save you $300 a week, and how to find the high-quality local markets that the 2026 algorithm hides from your search results. You've survived the urban jungle. Now it's time to eat like a local king on a backpacker's budget. The gastronomic landscape of Europe in 2026 is a battlefield where your wallet is the primary target. To understand the stakes, let us look at the case study of David, a traveler from Denver who landed in Madrid in May 2026. David, like many U.S. travelers, relied on his phone's top-rated suggestions for his first meal. He ended up at a restaurant in the Plaza Mayor where the menu featured vibrant, high-resolution photographs of paella and sangria. Because he arrived at 6:30 p.m., an hour when most Spaniards are just finishing their afternoon nap, the restaurant was empty of locals but filled with other Americans. David ordered a seafood paella and a large glass of sangria. The potential outcome of this single meal was a bill of €52 for a dish that was likely frozen and reheated in a microwave. Historical trends in European tourism show that restaurants with picture menus or multilingual staff standing on the sidewalk are almost exclusively tourist traps designed for one-time transactions. In 2026, the data-driven traveler follows a different set of rules to eat like a local king on a fraction of that budget. Step 1 is the mastery of the midday meal. In Spain, this is the menu del dia. In France, the formule or menu fixe. and in Italy the pranzo di lavoro. Imagine if David had waited until 2 p.m. the next day and walked 3 blocks away from the main square into a side street. He would have found a chalkboard menu offering a 3-course meal including a starter, a main course, a dessert, and a half-liter of wine or a beer, all for 14 euros. By flipping his primary meal from dinner to lunch, David saves nearly $300 over a 2-week trip while eating higher quality, seasonal ingredients. The secret to navigating 2026 dining etiquette starts with the physical act of sitting down. In Italy, there is a massive price disparity between the banco and the tavolo. If David stands at the bar to drink his espresso and eat a cornetto, the cost is roughly 2.50 euros. If he takes that same coffee and sits at a table with a white tablecloth, the price can jump to 8 euros or more due to the service charge. This is not a scam. It is a cultural standard where you are paying for the real estate and the time spent at the table. To save money, do as the locals do. Stand at the bar, engage in a 30-second conversation with the barista, and move on. Furthermore, we must address the 2026 water trap. In the United States, water is a free right provided at the start of every meal. In Europe, water is a commodity. If David sits down and simply asks for water, the waiter will bring a glass bottle of mineral water that adds 5 to 7 euros to the bill. To avoid this, David must be specific. In France, he asks for a carafe d'eau. In Italy, acqua del rubinetto. However, the most effective strategy for the 2026 backpacker is the utilization of public infrastructure. Cities like Rome and Zurich have thousands of public fountains, like the Nissoni in Rome, that provide ice-cold, high-quality drinking water for free. By carrying a reusable bottle and refilling it at these historical fountains, David avoids the potential outcome of spending over 100 euros a month on plastic bottles that are not only expensive but increasingly restricted by European environmental laws. Grocery stores in 2026 have evolved into the backpacker's greatest resource for high-quality nutrition. Imagine if David bypasses the 18-euro avocado toast at a trendy cafe and instead walks into a local Monoprix in Paris or a Mercadona in Spain. For 6 euros, he can purchase a freshly baked baguette, 100 grams of local Iberian ham, and a wedge of manchego cheese. This is the authentic European picnic. When you combine this with a 4-euro bottle of local wine from the supermarket, which is often better than the house wine in a tourist restaurant, you are eating a world-class meal for 10% of the cost of a sit-down dinner. Historical trends show that the most successful budget travelers are those who source 50% of their calories from local markets and supermarkets, rather than restaurants. We also need to discuss the resurgence of the market hall in 2026. While the famous markets like La Boqueria in Barcelona have become highly commercialized, every neighborhood has its own local market. These are the places where the algorithm fails to guide you, because they are not optimized for English-speaking tourists. Step by step, David should look for markets that open at 7 a.m. and close by 2 p.m. These are not places for souvenirs. They are for the local trade. Here, David can find the daily special from a small stall, perhaps a bowl of tripe stew in Florence or a freshly fried fish cone in Lisbon, for 5 or 6 euros. This is where the true heart of European gastronomy resides. Alcohol consumption in 2026 also requires a tactical approach. The historical trend of the pub crawl is being replaced by the piazza culture. In many European cities, it is perfectly legal and socially acceptable to buy a beer or a bottle of wine at a convenience store and drink it in a public square while watching the sunset. Compare the potential outcomes. David could spend 12 euros on a single pint of beer at a bar in London's Leicester Square. Or he could spend 2 euros at a local shop and sit on the steps of a 1,000-year-old church with a view that no bar can provide. However, you must be aware of the 2026 local ordinances. Cities like Amsterdam and Prague have introduced specific zones where public drinking is fine to combat over-tourism. Always check for local signage before popping a cork in public. The final piece of the gastronomic puzzle is the tipping myth. In 2026, the pressure to tip like an American has increased due to digital payment systems that prompt for 18, 20, or 25%. You must resist this. In most of Europe, the staff are paid a living wage and are not dependent on tips. A tip is a reward for truly exceptional service, not an obligation. If David's bill is 32 euros, leaving the 80 cents of change is standard. If he leaves 10 euros, he is seen as a flamboyant tourist who doesn't understand the local economy. David has now mastered the art of fueling his body without draining his bank account. He knows how to bypass the tourist traps, leverage the lunch menus, and utilize the public fountains of the old world. But even with a full stomach and a secure wallet, David still has to get around. The European transit network of 2026 is a marvel of engineering, but it is also a labyrinth of competing apps, high-speed rail wars, and predatory budget airlines. In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to dive into the transit matrix. We will break down why your Eurail pass might actually be a waste of money, how to use the secret night bus networks that connect entire countries for €10, and the 2026 hack for getting business class train seats for the price of an economy ticket. The journey between cities is where most travelers lose their minds and their money. We are going to make sure you do neither. To master the transit matrix of 2026, you must first understand that the European rail system is no longer a singular entity. It has evolved into a hyper-competitive marketplace where state-owned giants are fighting for survival against private upstarts. Consider the case study of Jordan, a traveler from Columbus, Ohio, who planned a month-long journey from London to Budapest in July 2026. Jordan followed the traditional advice and purchased a 15-day global Eurail pass for roughly $550. He believed this would give him total freedom to hop on any train at any time. This was a critical tactical error. When Jordan tried to board the Eurostar from London to Paris, he discovered that while his pass covered the fare, he was required to purchase a seat reservation that cost an additional €35. Furthermore, because it was peak season, all pass holder allotments for the day were sold out. Jordan was forced to wait 48 hours in London, spending an extra $200 on unplanned accommodation. Historical trends in 2026 show that on high-speed routes in France, Italy, and Spain, seat reservations are not optional. They are a mandatory barrier to entry. If you are caught on a TGV or an avenue without a physical reservation linked to your pass, the potential outcome is a €150 fine and immediate removal at the next station. Imagine if Jordan had ignored the Eurail pass altogether and used the 2026 point-to-point strategy. By using integrated booking platforms 60 days in advance, he could have secured a ticket on a private competitor like Italo in Italy or Ouigo in France for as low as €19. The liberalization of the European rail market in the mid-2020s has created a price war on major corridors. For example, on the Madrid to Barcelona route, 3 different companies now compete for passengers. This competition means that a savvy traveler who books early can often travel in a premium cabin for less than the cost of a standard second-class seat on a state-run train. This is the first-class hack of 2026. On midweek departures, specifically Tuesdays and Wednesdays, the price difference between economy and business class often drops to less than €10. In business class, you receive a dedicated power outlet, significantly more legroom, and often a complimentary meal and drink, which saves you an additional €15 you would have spent at a station cafe. Step by step, your rail strategy should follow the 60-day rule. Use an aggregator app to compare the state-run lines against private competitors. If you are traveling on a route with high competition, buy point-to-point tickets. Only consider a rail pass if you are exploring the regional lines of Germany, Switzerland, or Austria, where reservations are generally not required and flexibility is still the standard. But the rail lines are only one part of the matrix. We must also address the resurgence of the night train and the long-distance bus network. In 2026, the Nightjet network, operated by Austrian Railways, has expanded to connect almost every major capital. Imagine if Jordan leaves Vienna at 9 p.m. and arrives in Paris at 9 a.m. By booking a bunk in a 4-person couchette, he pays €90. While this sounds expensive compared to a budget flight, Jordan has effectively combined his transit cost with his accommodation cost. He avoids the €120 hotel fee for the night and wakes up in the city center, bypassing the 2-hour commute from an outlying airport. However, for the ultra-budget traveler, the 2026 bus network remains the ultimate survival tool. Companies like Flixbus and BlaBlaCar Bus have created a high-frequency grid that covers the entire continent. The case study of a traveler moving from Prague to Berlin illustrates the efficiency of this system. A train ticket might cost €45 and take 4 hours. A bus ticket costs €15 and takes 4.5 hours. For a backpacker on a 90-day journey, these €30 savings add up to $2,700 over the course of the trip. The downside is the comfort factor. In 2026, the bus is often referred to as the rolling hostel. It is loud, crowded, and the Wi-Fi is rarely as stable as advertised. The tactical move here is to use the bus for shorter 4 to 5 hour segments during the day, rather than grueling 12-hour overnight hauls that leave you too exhausted to explore your destination. Now let us tackle the budget airline trap. The landscape of European aviation in 2026 is defined by the secondary airport strategy. When you see a €20 flight from London to Oslo, you are likely not flying into Oslo Gardermoen, you are flying into Sandefjordtorp, which is nearly 75 miles from the city. Historical trends show that travelers often spend more on the airport transfer bus than they did on the flight itself. Furthermore, in 2026, many budget airlines have introduced biometric gate agents that utilize high-resolution cameras to measure the dimensions of your bag as you walk through the tunnel. If your 40-liter bag is slightly overstuffed and won't fit into the metal sizer without a struggle, the machine flags your boarding pass automatically. The potential outcome is a €65 gate check fee. To avoid this, you must treat your packing list like a weight class sport. Weigh your bag before you leave the hostel, and ensure it is at least 1 kilogram under the limit to account for discrepancies in airport scales. Intercity mobility is the final layer of the transit matrix. Once Jordan arrives in a city like Amsterdam or Copenhagen, his reliance on traditional public transit should drop in favor of the 2026 e-bike revolution. Almost every major European city now has a municipal e-bike share program that is integrated into the city's transit app. For a flat daily fee of roughly €10, you have unlimited access to high-speed pedal assist bikes. This is not just a way to see the sights, it is a way to navigate the city faster than the metro. In cities with historic centers that are now largely car-free, the e-bike is the only way to reach hidden alleyways and remote viewpoints that tour buses cannot access. The integration of these systems requires a high level of digital organization. In 2026, you should utilize a single consolidated transit wallet on your smartphone. Many European regions, such as the Rhine-Ruhr area in Germany or the Isle de France, now offer all-in-one digital passes that cover trains, buses, trams, and even ferries. By loading these passes onto your device before you arrive, you bypass the confusion of local ticket machines, which are often the primary hunting grounds for pickpockets looking for distracted tourists. Jordan from Ohio eventually completed his trip, but only after he abandoned his Eurail pass in favor of a hybrid strategy of high-speed private rail and regional buses. He learned that the transit matrix is not about having a single ticket, it is about having a diverse set of tools and the data to know when to use each one. You now have the logistics to move through the continent like a ghost, saving thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours in the process. But moving between cities is only half the battle. What happens when you reach those cities and realize that the most famous landmarks are actually the worst way to spend your time? In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to dismantle the tourist trap mythology. We will look at why you should skip the climb up the Eiffel Tower, the secret to seeing the Mona Lisa without the crowds, and the high-altitude alpine villages that the 2026 tour groups haven't discovered yet. You've mastered the movement. Now it's time to master the destination. The concept of the must-see landmark is the most effective marketing tool ever devised to extract currency from American travelers. To understand the 2026 reality of these destinations, let us examine the case study of Liam, a software developer from Seattle who visited Paris in June. Liam grew up seeing the Mona Lisa in textbooks and movies, and he felt his trip would be incomplete without seeing it in person. He booked his ticket for the Louvre 3 weeks in advance, paying the standard €22 entry fee. Upon arrival, Liam was funneled through 3 separate security checkpoints and a labyrinthine corridor of stairs. When he finally reached the Salle des Etats, he found himself at the back of a crowd of 300 people, all holding their smartphones above their heads. He was permitted exactly 30 seconds in the front row to look at a 30-inch painting behind 2 inches of non-reflective glass before a security guard signaled for the next group to move forward. The potential outcome for Liam was a sense of profound disappointment. He spent 4 hours of his limited vacation time for 30 seconds of obstructed viewing. Historical trends show that the most iconic landmarks in Europe have transitioned from cultural sites into high-volume processing centers. In 2026, the Louvre has implemented a strict 30,000-person daily cap, yet the concentration of those people remains in 3 specific rooms. If you want to master the destination, you must apply the inverse landmark rule. This rule states that the cultural value of a site is often inversely proportional to the length of its Instagram geotag history. Instead of fighting the crowds at the Louvre for the Mona Lisa, imagine if Liam had walked 10 minutes further to the Richelieu wing. In this nearly empty section of the palace, he could have stood inches away from the massive coat of Hammurabi or the intricately carved apartments of Napoleon III. Better yet, the savvy 2026 traveler looks toward the Musée d'Orsay across the river. To navigate this properly, Do not show up at 10 a.m. when the tour buses arrive. Utilize the Thursday night late opening. From 6 p.m. to 9:45 p.m., the crowds dissipate, the lighting shifts, and you can sit on a bench in front of Van Gogh's Starry Night in near silence. This is the difference between consuming a landmark and experiencing art. The Eiffel Tower presents a similar tactical challenge. In 2026, the security perimeter around the base of the tower has been reinforced, turning the area into a concrete fortress. To go to the summit, you will likely wait 2 hours in the sun, pay €30, and end up with a view of Paris that is missing the most important part of the skyline, the Eiffel Tower itself. The superior potential outcome is to visit the Tour Montparnasse. For a smaller fee, you take an elevator to the 56th floor and have a panoramic view of the entire city, including the Eiffel Tower, without the suffocating crowds or the aggressive street vendors at the base. Moving south to Italy, the 2026 landscape is defined by the access fee. Let us look at the case study of Emma from Boston, who traveled to Venice. Since 2024, Venice has piloted a daily entry fee, but by 2026, this has become a permanent tiered system. If you visit on a peak weekend or a holiday, you must register on the official city portal and pay a fee that can range from €5 to €10. Emma arrived at the Santa Lucia train station without her QR code. She was met by local stewards and police who funneled her into a registration line that took 40 minutes to clear. Failure to have this code while walking through the city center can result in a fine of up to €300. To bypass the tourist trap of central Venice, Emma should have stayed in the Cannaregio district. While the crowds are choking the Rialto Bridge and St. Mark's Square, Cannaregio offers a glimpse of local life. Step by step, the tactical move is to use the Vaporetto, the water bus, to reach the island of Burano or the cemetery island of San Michele early in the morning. By 11 a.m., when the day trippers from the cruise ships arrive, you should be retreating to the quieter Cali of the northern lagoon. Historical trends in Venice show that the city becomes a different world after 9 p.m., when the day trippers leave. This is when the true backpacker emerges to enjoy the empty squares and the sound of water against the stone. The 2026 traveler also knows that the most famous mountain destinations in the Alps are currently suffering from success. Interlaken in Switzerland has become a high-priced hub for global tour groups, where a single burger can cost $25 and the hiking trails feel like a suburban sidewalk. To find the soul of the Alps, you must head toward the Julian Alps in Slovenia. Consider the comparison between Lake Bled and Lake Bohinj. Lake Bled is the iconic image on every postcard, and in 2026, it is swamped with tourists vying for the perfect shot of the church on the island. However, just 20 minutes further by local bus lies Lake Bohinj. It is larger, wilder, and surrounded by the jagged peaks of Triglav National Park. There are no massive hotels here, only small goose houses and a cable car that takes you to the Vogelski area for a view of the entire range. The cost of food and accommodation in Slovenia remains significantly lower than in Switzerland or the French Alps, providing a high-value potential outcome for the budget-conscious traveler. Another hidden gem of 2026 is the Appenzell region in northeastern Switzerland. While most Americans flock to the Lauterbrunnen Valley, Appenzell maintains a strict adherence to local tradition. This is where you find the Silbsee, a mountain lake so pristine it looks artificial. The hike from the Wasserrauen station up to the Escher Mountain Hut, which is built directly into the side of a cliff, is a masterclass in alpine beauty. Step by step, you should take the first train of the morning from Zurich, start your ascent before 8 a.m., and enjoy a traditional rosti at the hut before the midday heat. In Greece, the Acropolis of Athens has implemented a 20,000-person daily limit with specific time slots. Imagine if Emma from Boston showed up at 11 a.m. in August, the peak of the heat and the crowds. She would be standing on slippery marble with thousands of others, unable to hear her own thoughts. The 2026 strategy is the 8 a.m. slot. You must be at the gate at 7:45 a.m. You have exactly 1 hour of cool air and relative solitude before the heat and the crowds become unbearable. By 10:30 a.m., you should be done with the ruins and sitting in a shaded cafe in the Placa, watching the masses struggle up the hill. We have dismantled the myth of the primary landmark and explored the secondary sites that offer more value for your time and money. You have the tactical knowledge to navigate the 2026 entry fees and the timed reservation systems. But as your trip progresses into the second or third week, a new challenge will emerge, one that no packing list can solve. It is the psychological weight of the journey. In the next part of this masterclass, we are going to talk about backpackers' fatigue. We will dive into the social dynamics of the 2026 hostel scene, how to avoid the mid-trip burnout that causes many travelers to fly home early, and the secret to making deep, lasting connections with people from cultures you didn't even know existed. You've mastered the sights. Now it's time to master yourself. To understand the phenomenon of backpackers' fatigue, we must look at the psychological wall that almost every long-term traveler hits around the 3-week mark. Consider the case study of Chloe, a freelance illustrator from San Diego who set out in early 2026 for a 3-month grand tour of the continent. By day 22, Chloe found herself in a beautiful piazza in Florence, staring at the facade of the Santa Maria del Fiore, and felt absolutely nothing. The vibrant marble, the centuries of history, and the sunlight hitting the terracotta dome elements she had dreamed of for years seemed like a chore to observe. She was suffering from choice paralysis and sensory overstimulation, a potential outcome for any traveler who tries to treat a continent like a checklist rather than a living environment. Historical trends in travel psychology suggest that the human brain can only sustain a high level of novelty for approximately 20 to 25 days before it begins to seek routine as a survival mechanism. In 2026, this is exacerbated by the constant pressure of digital documentation. Chloe felt that if she wasn't constantly discovering something new to share or record, she was wasting her investment. To overcome this, you must master the art of the 0 day. Imagine if, instead of pushing through to the next museum, Chloe had checked into a small guest house in the Altrarno district, ignored her itinerary for 48 hours, and spent her time doing mundane tasks like laundry or reading in a local park. This reset is not a loss of time. It is a tactical preservation of your mental health. The 2026 social landscape of the European hostel has also undergone a massive transformation that dictates how you manage this fatigue. Gone are the days of the chaotic, dirt-cheap dorm being the only option. The market has bifurcated into 2 distinct categories: the social-heavy party hostel and the hybrid co-working hostel. If you are a U.S. traveler in your mid-20s or older, the hybrid model is your sanctuary. These spaces are designed for the digital nomad and the slow traveler, featuring quiet zones, high-quality communal kitchens, and privacy-focused bunk designs. Step by step, you must navigate the social contract of the hostel to avoid burnout. When you enter a dorm room in 2026, the etiquette is silent but strict. Your belongings must stay within the footprint of your bed or your designated locker. The case study of a traveler in Berlin who left their gear scattered across a shared room reveals a quick potential outcome: social ostracization by the rest of the dorm. To make lasting connections, the communal kitchen is your primary theater of operations. In the United States, we often view a shared kitchen as a utility. In Europe, it is a social hub. Historical trends show that more meaningful connections are made over a shared €10 pasta dinner in a hostel kitchen than in any bar or club. If you want to meet people from across the globe, don't wait for an organized pub crawl. Buy a bag of local produce, start cooking, and ask a fellow traveler where they have been and where they are going. This simple exchange is the foundation of the backpacker network. However, many U.S. travelers fall into the American bubble. This is the tendency to gravitate toward other Americans, speaking English at a high volume and discussing things happening back home. While this provides comfort, it limits the growth potential of your journey. To break this bubble in 2026, you should utilize local interest groups and skill-sharing platforms. Instead of joining a generic city walking tour, look for a local running club, a bouldering gym, or a language exchange meetup. In cities like Lisbon and Belgrade, these communities are incredibly welcoming to travelers. By engaging in a familiar activity in a foreign context, you remove the pressure of being a tourist and allow for organic, deep-seated connections with locals. Physical maintenance is the next pillar of surviving the mid-trip slump. The 2026 European diet, while high in quality, is often heavy in carbohydrates and fats compared to the diverse options in major U.S. cities. After 3 weeks of baguettes, pasta, and pastries, your energy levels will naturally plummet. Step by step, you need to implement a nutritional audit. Find a local supermarket and stock up on dark greens, protein-heavy snacks like Greek yogurt or skyr, and hydration salts. Most U.S. travelers underestimate the impact of hard water dehydration and the lack of vitamin D during a rainy European spring. Small adjustments to your physical intake can drastically alter your emotional resilience. We also have to discuss the concept of loneliness versus solitude. Backpacking is often marketed as a social endeavor, but there will be nights when you are surrounded by people and feel completely alone. This is particularly common in the 2026 era of curated travel, where everyone else's journey looks perfect on a screen. Imagine if Chloe, sitting in that Florence piazza, had acknowledged that it is okay to feel lonely. Solitude is a skill that must be practiced. Use your time in transit, those long train rides through the Swiss Alps or the bus through the Balkan Mountains, as a form of forced meditation. Disconnect from the Wi-Fi, put your phone in your bag, and simply watch the landscape change. This is where the internal processing of your journey happens. Another critical strategy for 2026 is the 3-3-3 rule for pacing. This means spending at least 3 nights in any city, visiting no more than 3 major attractions per day, and taking 1 full day of rest for every 3 days of travel. When US travelers try to see 10 cities in 14 days, they spend more time in the transit matrix than in the actual destinations. The potential outcome is a blur of train stations and hotel lobbies that leaves you exhausted and unable to recall the specifics of any one place. By slowing down, you give your brain the chance to encode memories properly. You start to recognize the person at the local bakery. You understand the rhythm of the neighborhood. This is when the city stops being a backdrop and starts becoming an experience. As you move through this phase of your trip, you will find that your needs change. The flashy gear you bought in the US might start to break, your clothes will wear out, and your patience might thin. This is the stage where the true backpacker is forged. You learn to negotiate, to adapt, and to find beauty in the mundane. But there is one final hurdle that can derail even the most seasoned traveler, and it has nothing to do with your mindset or your social skills. It is the sudden, unpredictable emergency. As we transition into the next part of this masterclass, we are going to look at the tactical survival guide for the worst-case scenario. We will break down exactly what to do if you get sick in a country where you don't speak the language, how to navigate the European healthcare systems as a US citizen in 2026, and the step-by-step protocol for when you lose your passport, your phone, and your money all at once. You have mastered the soul of the journey. Now we need to ensure you can survive its most dangerous moments. The reality of travel is that things go wrong. Knowing exactly what to do when they do is what keeps the dream from becoming a nightmare. To understand the tactical survival requirements of 2026, let us look at the case study of Mark, a high school teacher from Chicago who was finishing his second week in Barcelona. Mark was standing in the middle of the Sants train station, checking the platform for his high-speed train to Madrid. In a lapse of situational awareness that lasted exactly 4 seconds, he set his daypack between his feet to adjust his main rucksack. When he looked down, the bag, containing his iPhone 17, his US passport, his physical wallet, and his backup credit cards, was gone. Mark had reached the absolute zero point of international travel. He was in a foreign country with no identification, no communication, and no currency. Historical trends in 2026 suggest that these total loss scenarios are increasing as professional theft syndicates target the high-value digital ecosystems that Americans carry. If you find yourself in Mark's position, your potential outcome depends entirely on the first 60 minutes of your response. Step 1 is the denuncia. In Spain, and similarly across the European Union, a formal police report is the foundational document for everything that follows. Mark had to find the Mossos de Esquadra station within the transit hub. He did not speak Spanish, but in 2026, most major European transit police stations have integrated AI translation kiosks. He provided the serial numbers of his stolen devices, which he had stored in his encrypted cloud shadow, and received a physical copy of the report. This paper is now his temporary ID. Without it, he cannot even check into a hostel or board a domestic train. Imagine if Mark had not prepared his digital shadow. He would be unable to prove his identity to the police or the consulate. But because he had his passport number and a scan of his ID in a secure cloud folder, he was able to access these from a public computer at a local library. This leads to the next critical step, the US Embassy or consulate. Mark had to navigate to the US consulate in Barcelona. In 2026, US citizen services at embassies have moved to an appointment-only model, but for a lost or stolen passport, you are classified as an emergency walk-in. Mark arrived at the gate at 8 a.m. He was required to provide 2 new passport photos, which he obtained at a nearby photo booth for €10, and pay the $165 fee. Because his funds were stolen, he had to utilize the Emergency Financial Assistance Program, where a family member back in Chicago could wire funds directly to the Department of State for his use. The potential outcome of this visit was an emergency passport. This is a purple-covered, limited validity document. It is not a full 10-year passport. It is designed specifically to get you back to the United States or to continue a pre-planned journey. Historical trends show that these can often be issued within 24 to 48 hours, but they are flagged in the Schengen information system. Mark could continue to Madrid, but he would face additional scrutiny at every border crossing and airport. Now, let us look at the 2026 medical emergency. Imagine if Mark hadn't been robbed, but instead woke up in a hostel in Munich with a fever of 103 degrees and severe abdominal pain. The American instinct is to fear the cost of a hospital visit, often leading travelers to delay care. In Europe, the system is tiered differently. Step by step, Mark should first utilize the Green Cross. Across France, Italy, and Spain, the local pharmacy is a high-level triage center. European pharmacists have the legal authority to provide medical advice, and even certain medications that would require a prescription in the US. If the pharmacist sees a red flag, they will direct you to the local emergency services. If the situation is dire, the universal number is 112. This works in every EU country and is free from any phone, even one without a local SIM. For non-life-threatening but urgent issues in 2026, Mark should look for the Guardia Medica in Italy or the equivalent local after-hours clinics. These are specifically designed for urgent care, and usually cost between 30 and 60 euros for a consultation. Historical trends indicate that a full emergency room visit in a public European hospital, even for an uninsured American, rarely exceeds 500 to 800 euros for standard diagnostics, a fraction of the cost in the US. However, without private travel insurance that includes emergency evacuation, a serious surgery could still result in a five-figure bill. Mark's policy must include a repatriation clause, which covers the cost of a medically supervised flight back to the United States if he is unable to continue his trip. The 2026 digital blackout is perhaps the most modern threat to a backpacker's survival. If Mark loses his phone, he loses his two-factor authentication for his banking apps. He cannot log in to move money or verify a purchase. To mitigate this, Mark should have printed his one-time recovery codes for his primary accounts and sewn them into the lining of his bag or hidden them inside a book. If he is locked out, his only potential outcome is to use a secondary device or a trusted person back home to reset his credentials. This is why the analog backup, a physical notebook with phone numbers, addresses of embassies, and policy numbers, is more valuable in 2026 than it was a decade ago. The financial recovery protocol for Mark involved the use of an emergency hidden bill. Every US traveler should carry a high-denomination note, like a $100 bill or a €100 note, completely separate from their wallet. Mark had his tucked behind the insoles of his shoes. This €100 allowed him to buy food, pay for local transit to the consulate, and secure a bed in a cheap hostel while waiting for his emergency funds to arrive. Without this survival cash, he would have been at the mercy of strangers or local charities. Step by step, your emergency protocol must be: secure your physical safety, obtain a police report, access your digital shadow for document copies, contact the nearest US consulate, and activate your insurance claim. In 2026, the complexity of these systems means that you cannot wing it. You must have a preloaded plan in your mind before the crisis occurs. Mark eventually made it to Madrid, albeit with a purple passport and a much more cautious attitude. He realized that the danger of Europe wasn't just about crime. It was about the fragility of the digital tethers we rely on. He survived because he knew the numbers to call and the locations of the support structures. But as he prepared to board his flight back to the US, he faced one final challenge that no one warned him about. It wasn't a thief or a virus. It was the psychological transition of going back. In the final part of this masterclass, we are going to talk about the return protocol. We will explore how to integrate 3 months of European growth into your life in the United States, how to translate your backpacking skills into a professional resume that gets you hired, and the one thing every traveler forgets to do in their final 48 hours that usually results in a massive financial penalty. You've survived the trip of a lifetime. Now let's make sure it actually changes your life. The transition from the cobblestone streets of the old world back to the high-speed efficiency of the United States begins exactly 48 hours before your flight departs. To understand the gravity of this window, let us look at the case study of Tyler, a structural engineer from Atlanta, who spent the summer of 2026 traversing the Balkan Peninsula and Central Europe. Tyler had managed his budget with surgical precision, but in his final 2 days in Munich, he made a series of logistical omissions that resulted in a loss of over $900. This is the financial penalty of the unprepared returnee. The first and most significant leak in Tyler's budget was the value-added tax or VAT refund. In the European Union, the prices you see on tags include a sales tax that often ranges from 15 to 25%. As a U.S. citizen, you are not a resident of the EU, which means you are legally entitled to a refund of this tax on high-value goods like electronics, luxury items, or high-end outdoor gear. Tyler had purchased a premium €1,200 camera and a €600 technical jacket during his trip. Historical trends show that many U.S. travelers believe this refund happens automatically at the point of sale. It does not. Step by step, the VAT recovery process requires a specific protocol. When Tyler bought these items, he should have requested a tax-free form from the retailer and presented his U.S. passport at the counter. In 2026, many retailers use digital systems like Global Blue or Planet, but the physical validation remains the bottleneck. The massive financial penalty Tyler faced occurred because he packed these items into his checked luggage before reaching the airport. When he arrived at Munich airport, he went to the customs office to get his forms stamped. The customs officer asked to see the physical items to verify they were being exported and used. Because Tyler's bags were already in the belly of the airport's transit system, the officer refused to stamp the forms. This simple mistake cost Tyler nearly €350 in lost refunds. The rule for 2026 is absolute. Carry your tax-free purchases in your carry-on or visit the customs desk before you drop your bags at the airline check-in. The second part of Tyler's financial penalty came at the U.S. border. Imagine if you are standing in the Customs and Border Protection line at Hartsfield-Jackson International. Tyler had a bag of local cheeses from Switzerland and a single, unpeeled orange he had saved from his hostel breakfast. He checked the box on his declaration form stating he was not bringing any agricultural products. When the agricultural K9 unit flagged his bag, the orange was discovered. Under 2026 federal guidelines, this resulted in an immediate $500 on-the-spot fine. U.S. Customs does not offer warnings for biological risks. This is why you must utilize the CBP One mobile app or the Mobile Passport Control app before you even land. These tools allow you to declare your items digitally and often provide a faster transit through the terminal, but they require total honesty. Any item that was once alive, fruit, meat, seeds, or even certain wooden souvenirs, must be declared or discarded before you hit the primary inspection point. Beyond the immediate financial risks, the final 48 hours are for the digital and professional audit. As a U.S. traveler in 2026, your journey has generated a massive amount of data and new skills that have a high market value if packaged correctly. Let us look at the case study of a hiring manager in Chicago reviewing a resume in late 2026. Most applicants who travel simply list their trip as a gap in employment. The savvy traveler, however, translates the backpacking experience into professional competencies. You have just completed a 90-day masterclass in logistical management, crisis resolution, and cross-cultural communication. Step by step, you should update your professional profile with specific bullet points. Instead of saying you traveled Europe, you should state that you managed a multi-thousand-dollar budget across 12 different currencies and jurisdictions. You should highlight that you successfully navigated the 2026 ESHAs and Schengen regulatory frameworks, demonstrating an ability to comply with complex international legal standards. If you encountered a strike in France or a tech failure in Berlin and solved it, that is a case study in high-pressure problem-solving. Historical trends in the 2026 job market show that employers are increasingly looking for the adaptability and global perspective that only independent international travel can provide. Furthermore, you must perform a digital cleanup. Throughout your trip, you likely signed up for regional eSIM plans, transit apps with auto-renewing subscriptions, and perhaps a premium version of a hostel booking platform. In the chaos of returning home, these small $10 and $20 charges often go unnoticed for months. Imagine if Tyler had 4 different transit subscriptions in 4 different countries all ticking away on his credit card. Over a 6-month period, this results in hundreds of dollars of ghost expenses. Your final night in Europe should be spent auditing your app subscriptions and ensuring your US-based accounts are ready to be reactivated. The psychological transition is the final and perhaps most difficult hurdle. We call this reverse culture shock. In 2026, the contrast between the pedestrian-heavy, social-centric European cities and the car-dependent, productivity-obsessed American landscape is more jarring than ever. You will experience a potential outcome of frustration with the pace of life back home. You will miss the ease of the €3 espresso and the silence of the night trains. To mitigate this, do not attempt to jump back into a 40-hour work week the day after you land. Give yourself a 3-day buffer to recalibrate your internal clock and process the thousands of images and interactions you have experienced. As you look back on your 40-liter bag, now worn and covered in the dust of a dozen different cities, you realize that you are not the same person who left the US 3 months ago. You have gained a tactical awareness and a global empathy that cannot be taught in a classroom. You have learned to trust your intuition, to read a map in a language you don't speak, and to find common ground with people whose lives are vastly different from your own. This is the true return on your investment. But even as you settle back into your life in the United States, a new itch will begin to form. Europe was the foundation, the proving ground. You have mastered the old world, but the global landscape of 2026 is vast. Are you ready to take these skills and apply them to the high-altitude markets of the Andes or the hypergrowth megacities of Southeast Asia? The logistics are different, the risks are higher, and the rewards are even more profound. In our next masterclass series, we are going to go beyond the developed world and look at the frontiers of 2027. We will break down how to navigate the emerging visa-free zones in South America and the secret to finding high-speed internet in the most remote islands of the Philippines. Your journey hasn't ended. It has just entered its next phase. Prepare your passport. The world is only getting bigger.